Welcome. Today we're doing a detailed examination of a case that truly shocked the nation, the abduction and the 18-year captivity of Jaycee Lee Dugard. We're going to take the sources you provided and really conduct a forensic analysis of the timeline, the perpetrators, and critically, the staggering number of missed opportunities that let this crime go on for almost 2 decades.
This is a profoundly difficult story, and while we have to address the facts of the abuse, our focus is really on the mechanisms of long-term captivity and the spectacular failures within the parole system and just the sheer resilience that's required for survival. We're going to try to establish a very clear understanding of the events as they're documented.
So let's just start with the basic facts, which are shocking enough on their own. Jaycee was abducted on June 10, 1991, from a small town, Myers, California. She was missing, held captive only 120 miles away in Antioch until she reappeared on August 26, 2009. It's over 18 years. 18 years hidden in plain sight.
And to really understand that shock, we have to start with Jaycee's life right before it happened. It just adds such a heartbreaking layer of context to the whole thing.
Jaycee was born in South Lake Tahoe back in 1980. So she was just an 11-year-old girl when she was taken. And the sources really emphasized that her family, her mother, Terry Dugard, and her stepfather, Carl Proben, they were trying to build a safe life.
Exactly. And the family dynamic, their recent move, it's all highly significant. Terry Dugard married Carl Proben when Jaycee was 7. And crucially, they had moved from Arcadia, in Los Angeles County, to this rural mountain community of Myers in September 1990.
Less than a year before the abduction.
Less than a year. And the sources are explicit about this. They moved specifically because they wanted a safer community. They were seeking refuge from what they saw as the dangers of a more urban life.
And that's what's so tragic about it, isn't it? The irony is just, It's heartbreaking. They sought safety, and then this happens right outside their home.
It does. And at that exact moment, in June 1991, Jaycee's life was completely normal. She was just a 5th grader looking forward to a field trip that week. Her world was, well, it was innocent. It was all about school and family, right up until the moment Phillip Garrido's car stopped.
The event itself was just.
Yeah.
It was calculated and swift. She was walking up a hill to her school bus stop. She was wearing her favorite all-pink outfit, which, that detail later became iconic on the missing posters.
And she made a fatal but completely understandable assumption. She saw this gray car approaching and just thought they were stopping to ask for directions.
A common thing in a quiet rural area like Myers.
Right. She approached without any suspicion at all.
But the reality was immediate violence. Phillip Garrido used a stun gun. He tased her until she was unconscious, and then his wife, Nancy Garrido, pulled her into the car.
And the sources reveal this chilling detail. Nancy immediately removed most of Jaycee's clothing and covered her with a blanket. It was, clearly designed to erase her identity, to make any escape that much more complicated.
It's part of that process of dehumanization and control from the very first second.
Absolutely. But even in that terror, she managed this one small act of preservation. She tucked away a little butterfly-shaped ring and managed to keep it hidden for all 18 years. That ring became this private symbol of her identity, something they couldn't take.
The drive back to Antioch was 3 hours long. She was drifting in and out of consciousness, and the one thing she's recorded as saying was this plea that her parents couldn't afford a ransom.
Which just shows you her mindset. Even as an 11-year-old, her fear was financial, based on, TV shows or movies about kidnapping, not the reality she was about to face.
And there are witnesses. Her stepfather, Carl Proben, saw it happen from nearby. He saw Phillip driving the gray car, maybe a Mercury Monarch, and he saw Nancy forcing Jaycee inside.
His reaction was just immediate and desperate. He chased the car on his bicycle, but of course he couldn't keep up.
And other classmates waiting for the bus, they saw it too. They confirmed the details.
And this is where another tragedy begins, one that happens so often in these cases. The suspicion immediately fell on the family.
Right. Carl Proben was the last guardian to see her, so law enforcement spent a lot of time and resources on him.
He was put through the ringer, but he passed multiple polygraph tests.
Jaycee's biological father, Ken Slayton, he was also investigated but cleared very quickly.
But that stress, the public scrutiny, and of course the failure to find Jaycee, it was just too much for them. It tragically led to the end of Terry Dugard and Carl Proben's marriage.
Despite all that, the initial search effort was immediate and massive. It really showed how shocked that community was.
Oh, yeah. Local and national media were there almost instantly.
It scaled up so fast. Within just a few days, you had dozens of local volunteers searching. Within weeks, it was a national effort. Tens of thousands of flyers and posters with that iconic picture of Jaycee were mailed all over the United States.
And the community response was so visible, so emotional. Pink was her favorite color, so pink ribbons were just everywhere in Myers. A sign of hope.
Her mother founded a group, Jaycee's Hope, to coordinate volunteers and fundraising.
They even sold cassette tapes of a song called Jaycee Lee just to raise money for printing and postage.
And the professional organizations got involved right away. Child Quest International, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Yeah, a reward was offered. The case was on America's Most Wanted just 4 days after she was taken.
So this wasn't a case that went cold in the public's mind.
Not at all. For years, that community held candlelight vigils. They ran child safety campaigns. Her story was visible, and yet she was hidden just over 100 miles away. The contrast is it's jarring.
So now we have to turn our focus to the perpetrators, Phillip and Nancy Garrido. Specifically, Phillip's history and his parole status, because that really sets the stage for the massive institutional failures we need to talk about.
Phillip Craig Garrido, born in 1951, had a long documented history of sexually deviant and criminal behavior. And this background is absolutely critical context when you look at how he was being monitored, or really how he wasn't being monitored before 1991.
His father apparently attributed a big change in his personality to a serious motorcycle accident he had as a teenager.
Right. After that, he turned to chronic drug use methamphetamine, LSD, and the pattern started early. In 1972, he was arrested for raping a 14-year-old girl. That case was dropped because the victim declined to testify.
Which is a huge red flag that should have been all over any file on him.
A huge one. The next year he married, and his wife later accused him of domestic violence and kidnapping when she tried to leave.
But the major crime, the one that made him a high-risk federal offender, was in 1976.
The kidnapping and rape of 25-year-old Catherine Calloway Hall, and we need to pause on this detail. This crime happened in South Lake Tahoe.
The same general region where Jaycee was taken 15 years later.
Exactly. He took Calloway Hall to a warehouse in Reno, Nevada, where the assault lasted for over 5 hours.
And his arrest was almost by chance, right?
Right.
A police officer just happened to notice a car outside the warehouse and a break and lock.
Yes. It was. And the psychiatric evaluation after his conviction is another key piece of this. He was diagnosed as a sexual deviant and chronic drug abuser. He got a 50-year federal sentence and went to Leavenworth Penitentiary in 1977.
So you have a documented history of predatory behavior, a diagnosis of deviance, and a prior kidnapping and rape conviction in the exact same geographical area.
Which is why the failure to connect those dots later is so egregious.
And while he was at Leavenworth, he met Nancy Bocanegra. She was visiting her uncle, who was also an inmate.
They married in prison in 1981, so this is where Nancy enters the picture as a known associate of a high-risk offender.
And Phillip was released in 1988. He was transferred to federal parole in Contra Costa County, California. He and Nancy moved into his elderly mother's house in Antioch.
And this is where the system failure just starts to accelerate. As a parolee for kidnapping and rape, Garrido was supposed to be under intense supervision. He had a GPS ankle bracelet. He was supposed to have regular intrusive visits from federal agents, local deputies, parole officers.
So he was tagged, tracked, and under scrutiny, the very definition of a high-risk offender protocol.
Exactly. And yet, just 3 years after his release, he plans and executes the abduction of Jaycee Dugard. He brings her 120 miles back to his home and hides her in a compound in the backyard of the very house where he was being supervised. The system it failed completely.
So that journey to Antioch, it marked the beginning of 18 years of confinement, where psychological manipulation and fear were the main tools.
When Jaycee arrived, she was taken straight to this concealed backyard area. And this wasn't some makeshift hiding spot. The Garridos had created this series of tents and sheds designed to be completely invisible from the house and the street.
She was initially put in a tiny soundproofed shed.
And the psychological engineering started immediately. Garrido handcuffed her, left her naked inside that bolted shed, and the ultimate threat to establish his dominance was the lie about trained Doberman pinschers outside, ready to attack if she made a sound. It created immediate, paralyzing fear.
And the abuse was instant. The first time she was ever exposed to an unclothed man was when Garrido forced her into a shower with him right after she arrived.
For that first week, her only contact was with him. He brought her fast food and gave her a bucket for waste, just stripping away all dignity.
And the first rape happened within a week while she was still handcuffed.
And that became a routine. He raped her at least once a week for the first 3 years.
What were the psychological tools he used? How did he justify this to an 11-year-old?
It was elaborate and deeply delusional. He told her demon angels had allowed him to take her. He said she was there to help him with his sexual problems because in his mind, society had ignored him. It was this false narrative where she was a necessary participant in his delusion.
He also cut her off from the world. She had a TV, but she was forbidden from watching the news.
So she had no idea about the search efforts that her mother was desperately looking for her. She spent about 7 months in that first shed before being moved to a bigger room where she was then handcuffed to a bed.
The sources also mention his drug use. These meth binges he called runs.
Yes. During these, he would force her into sexual acts, rant about voices from the walls, claim he was a servant of God, and then they would end, often violently, or with him sobbing apologies, or threatening to sell her to people who would put her in a cage. That cycle of violence, delusion, and remorse is a very effective tool for trauma bonding and dependency.
And Nancy's role in all this is so unsettling. She wasn't introduced until 7 months in.
And her relationship with Jaycee was this bizarre mix of kindness and cruelty, a total contradiction.
On one hand, she'd bring her stuffed animals or chocolate milk, these sort of pseudo-motherly acts.
But on the other, she was cold, intensely cruel, expressed jealousy, and actively blamed Jaycee for the situation.
In a later interview, Jaycee called Nancy evil and twisted. She made it clear Nancy was a willing, manipulative participant.
Absolutely. And you see her full complicity when Phillip was briefly sent back to prison for a failed drug test. Nancy just stepped right into the role of Jaycee's sole jailer. She was an active enforcer, not just some passive victim of her husband.
And the physical environment, the compound, it was a tool of isolation itself.
It was an 8-foot-tall fence, high trees, completely invisible. It had the sheds, tents, a camping-style shower, and toilet. A self-contained prison.
The control even extended to emotional damage, like with the pets.
She was given kittens twice, and both times they just mysteriously vanished. It was a tactic to reinforce their power, to show her that anything she loved would be taken away.
And that led to them stripping away her identity. Garrido found her writing her real name in a journal about the kittens.
And he forced her to destroy the page. From then on, for 18 years, she was forbidden to say or write her own name. She became Alyssa.
And her physical health was completely neglected. Never saw a doctor, never saw a dentist.
No, her well-being was irrelevant. Only concealment mattered.
Then, almost 3 years into her captivity, she became pregnant. This must have fundamentally changed everything.
It did. She had to learn about childbirth just from watching television.
Her first daughter was born in August 1994. Jaycee was only 14.
And after that first birth, the sources say the frequency of rape decreased, though he would still assault her when he was using drugs.
Her second daughter was born in November 1997. Jaycee was 17. The last rape was the day that second daughter was conceived.
After that, Jaycee's role shifted. She became the primary caregiver and protector for her children. She used what little she had, mostly TV, to homeschool them, to shield them from Garridos' rants.
And the Garridos forced this other layer of fiction on the children.
They did. The girls were told to call Nancy Mother, and Jaycee was forced to tell them she was their older sister, Alyssa.
That lie was maintained their entire lives.
And it was critical for when they eventually had contact with outsiders, which they did.
That's one of the most unbelievable parts. She did have contact with the public.
Yes, as Alyssa, she sometimes worked in Garrido's print shop. She was a graphic artist.
She had a business phone, an email account.
She did. A customer even complimented her excellent work, totally unaware he was speaking to a missing person.
She never hinted at anything.
Nothing. It's a powerful illustration of the psychological grip he had on her.
And others saw them too. Neighbors, delivery people. They would see her and the girls, sometimes even answering the front door.
But she never indicated a problem, never tried to leave, which just shows you the effectiveness of that conditioning and especially the fear of what would happen to her daughters.
And the car used in the abduction was supposedly on the property the whole time.
It was, which just suggests this incredible sense of invulnerability, that they knew the parole system wasn't really watching.
Which brings us to this record of failure. The sheer number of missed opportunities is staggering.
It is, and it's what led directly to the massive civil lawsuits later on.
Let's start with the physical failures of supervision. Parole officers visited the property at least twice.
At least twice. But they never inspected the concealed backyard. They stuck to the house and the front yard, completely missing the hidden compound.
And there was this foundational failure to use the data they had. Police never connected the 1991 kidnapping near South Lake Tahoe with Garrido's 1976 crime.
The one that happened in the exact same region. That geographical link should have been an immediate red flag.
Then there's the tip from 1992, less than a year after the abduction.
A man calls the sheriff's department, says he saw a girl staring at a Jaycee Dugard missing poster in a gas station less than 2 miles from the Garridos' house.
And he said the girl left in a large, old, yellow Dodge van.
And the police did nothing. They didn't investigate the anonymous call.
And the van was there. A matching van was later found on the property.
A yellow Dodge van matching the description was recovered from the property after they were arrested.
Yeah, that speaks to an unbelievable level of negligence.
It does. Now, we should note, Jaycee's memoir later suggested she didn't leave the property between 91 and 94, but the institutional failure is the same. A credible tip linking a specific vehicle near a specific location was just ignored.
And even outside the police, there were chances. In 2002, the fire department responded to an injury at the house.
A juvenile shoulder injury related to a swimming pool. This should have set off alarm bells everywhere.
Because the parole office had no record of a juvenile or a pool at the address of a high-risk offender.
Exactly. If that simple detail had been cross-referenced, it would have triggered a mandatory inspection for unauthorized contact with a minor.
And then, the 2006 911 call from a neighbor.
A neighbor who reported everything? Tents in the backyard, children living outside, and described Garrido as psychotic with sexual addictions.
A deputy responded, talked to Garrido at the front door for about 30 minutes, and then left.
And all he did was tell Garrido that living outside was a code violation. He completely disregarded the specific, serious allegations about the children.
After Jaycee reappeared, the local sheriff issued a public apology for that.
An apology, yes, but also a $20 million settlement from the state, which confirms they knew they had no defense against the negligence claims.
The gravity of all this was finally confirmed in November 2009 by the California Office of the Inspector General, the OIG report.
And that report was damning. The central finding was a failure in supervision classification. Garrido was incorrectly rated as needing only low-level supervision. Given his history, he should have been categorized at the highest possible risk level.
And why was that? Was it a paperwork error or something more systemic?
The report pointed to a combination of poor training and not enough resources for reviewing these high-risk cases. But that low classification was the key. It meant the parole agents didn't have to do the highly intrusive checks that would have required them to search the backyard. Everything stemmed from that one mistake.
And the report details a specific egregious example. A parole agent saw one of Jaycee's daughters, a 12-year-old girl, at the house.
And just accepted Garrido's lie that she was his brother's daughter.
And never verified it.
Never verified it. A single phone call to the brother would have confirmed he had no children. It shows the failure wasn't just systemic, it was about basic due diligence.
And it's worth noting, Garrido's former parole officer, Edward Santos Jr., he later broke his silence. He claimed he did search the house and backyard and that his actions led to the rescue, but he also said he felt silenced by the state, told to just keep quiet.
Which suggests a culture of protecting the institution rather than owning the failures.
The end of this long captivity wasn't due to the system working. It was because of Garrido's own erratic, delusional behavior.
Exactly. He basically sabotaged himself. The timeline begins on August 24, 2009. He goes to the San Francisco FBI office and leaves this rambling 4-page essay called Origin of Schizophrenia Revealed.
In it, he claimed he cured his own deviant behavior and had a solution for all sexual predators.
On that same day, he drives to the UC Berkeley campus with Jaycee's 2 daughters. He's trying to get permission for some event he called God's Desire.
And a special events manager there, Lisa Campbell, she noticed his behavior was erratic, and the girls were sullen and submissive. She very wisely asked him to make an appointment for the next day so she could get his name and contact info.
He comes back the next day. An officer, Allie Jacobs, gets Campbell's report, runs a background check, and immediately finds out he's a federal parolee for kidnapping and rape. Jacobs sees the girls, notes they look pale like they haven't been in the sun. She immediately calls his parole office.
And Garrido was already in violation just by being there. He was with minors. He'd traveled over his limit.
2 parole agents respond. They drive to his house, take him into custody, and drive him to the parole office.
And here's one last mind-boggling failure.
After reviewing his file, they decide to drive him back home that night. They just order him to report back the next day.
Unbelievable. So the final confrontation happens August 26, 2009.
Garrido reports to the Concord parole office as ordered. He arrives with Nancy, the two girls, and Jaycee, who he introduces as Alyssa.
The parole officer separates them for individual interviews.
And this is where that psychological conditioning really comes into play. Jaycee, as Alyssa, she defends Garrido, calls him a changed man, a great person.
And when they press her for ID, she becomes extremely defensive, claiming she's a battered wife in hiding.
It's only after a Concord police sergeant arrives and starts interviewing Garrido that Garrido confesses. He admits he kidnapped and raped Jaycee, and at that exact moment, Jaycee finally identifies herself.
She later explained that her resistance was all about fear, a paralyzing fear that her children would be taken from her if she told the truth.
And her initial defense of him immediately led to all this media speculation about Stockholm Syndrome.
But Jaycee herself firmly rejected that label. She called the idea that she was in love with his captor degrading and so far from the truth.
And that's a crucial distinction she made. She said her compliance, her apparent compassion, it was her only means of surviving. It shifts the focus from pathology to a forced protective adaptation, which is a really important insight.
So after her reappearance, the story shifts. It becomes one of recovery, legal resolution, and self-determination.
She was reunited with her mother, Terry, on August 27th. And crucially, she retained custody of her children.
The report said that she and her daughter seemed healthy and intelligent despite everything.
But the emotional damage was clear. Her stepfather noted that the daughters cried when they learned their father had been arrested. It reflects the complex, unnatural bond they had.
And other survivors, like Elizabeth Smart and Sean Hornbeck, offered insights.
Smart stressed focusing on the future. And Hornbeck said coming out was like entering a new world, going from black and white to full color.
Jaycee has dedicated herself to recovery and advocacy. She used animal-assisted therapy with horses.
And she founded the Jaycee Foundation, which supports families dealing with abduction and trauma.
The legal process against the Garridos began quickly. They initially pleaded not guilty.
Nancy's attorney tried to argue she was under Phillip's control, even drawing parallels to Patty Hearst. But that strategy failed.
And eventually, they both pled guilty to kidnapping and rape by force on April 28, 2011.
Which was likely a decision to avoid a long, traumatic trial that would have forced Jaycee to testify.
At the sentencing, Phillip Garrido got 431 years to life. Nancy got 36 years to life, making her eligible for parole in 2029.
Jaycee didn't attend, but she sent a powerful written statement that her mother read aloud in court.
And then came the civil suits against the government.
Yes. She first sued the state of California for all those monitoring lapses after 1999.
And in July 2010, the state approved a settlement for $20 million. It was a clear acknowledgement of fault.
But the federal lawsuit was a different story. She sued the U.S. government for failing to monitor him before 1999, citing things like his positive drug tests.
In 2016, the U.S. Court of Appeals dismissed that suit, and the rationale was based on sovereign immunity and the lack of a special relationship.
Right. And this needs a careful explanation. The court ruled that since Jaycee was not a victim of Garrido at the time, he was under federal supervision. And since she was just a member of the general public, the federal authorities had no specific duty to protect her.
So, just to be clear for you listening, the court is saying the government's duty to protect only extends to people they already have a defined relationship with, like a known victim or someone in custody, not the general public, even when there's negligence with a known high-risk offender.
It's a narrow definition, and it proved fatal to the federal case.
Jaycee has since taken complete control of her own narrative. She wrote her first book, A Stolen Life, in 2011 as part of her therapy.
She said she wanted it to help other survivors. And her second book, Freedom, My Book of Firsts, released in 2016, really showed a shift. It focused entirely on her recovery and reintegration, all her firsts, getting a driver's license, traveling. It was about defining her own life moving forward.
This whole examination just provides a chilling look at how one person's pathology, combined with these monumental institutional failures, allowed this to happen.
For almost 2 decades, hidden in a suburban backyard, the sheer volume of missed opportunities, the failure to connect the crimes, the ignored 911 call, the botched parole visits, it's a stark reminder of the vigilance that's required when you're managing high-risk offenders.
And what really stands out is the resilience of Jaycee Dugard. Under unimaginable stress, she survived, and she protected and raised 2 intelligent children.
So here's a final thought for you to reflect on. That legal principle from the federal court dismissal, it suggests authorities only have a duty to protect victims who are already identified, not the general public. even if a member of the public is then victimized by a known parolee who has already violated his terms. Does that narrow definition of duty really balance public safety with bureaucratic limitations? And what's the cost when the system isn't legally obligated to anticipate the next victim?
We sincerely appreciate you allowing us to share this detailed analysis of the source material.
We hope this examination has provided some clarity and context on this incredibly difficult sequence of events.
Thanks for listening.